Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm McKenna. I'm the owner of Murder by the Book in Houston, Texas, and I am back on here today for another virtual event. This evening, we are going to be joined by Margaret Mizushima and Scott Graham talking about their new books. Earlier this afternoon, I was in conversation with Stuart Neville, so if you were unable to watch that in the middle of the afternoon, it's now available here on Facebook and on YouTube, and it was a great conversation about his brand new book, A House of Ashes. As always, we have a lot of virtual events going on. We were just talking about that a minute ago. So if you're interested in seeing who is going to be on here anytime soon, I've just updated all of the events through the end of October are on our Facebook event calendar, as well as on our calendar at murderbooks.com. For the time being, we're still not doing in-store events. We had them scheduled and they got canceled. So we're continuing to do virtual events. We have a pretty cool event for a ticketed event with Richard Osman coming up, as well as a ticketed event with Lee and Andrew Child at the end of October. I think all the rest of them coming up are free and just viewable on Facebook or YouTube. If you've missed some, we have quite the archive of these on our YouTube channel now. So you might take a visit over there. There's lots of great stuff. As always, if you want more information about the authors or their books, I've dropped a link in the comments on Facebook and a link in the live chat on YouTube on how more information about them, as well as how to order from us if you're so inclined. Also, don't be shy. We'll get to questions in the second half of this. I'm going to let the two authors talk and I'm going to go away. When I come back, we'll be waiting for your questions. So make sure to pop those in the comments so we can get to them in a little bit. Okay, that's enough out of me for now. So let's start with Margaret Mizushima. Hi, Margaret. How are you this evening?
Hi. I'm good. How are you tonight, McKenna?
I am well. It's a Friday evening. We're going to do this virtual event, and I'm going to pour myself some wine. It's good.
It is. It's a fun night. Thank you for having us here tonight.
Of course, always a pleasure. It was nice hosting you guys months and months ago, and I'm glad you're back for this in conversation. Let me get your formal bio done, and then we'll get Scott on here as well. Margaret Mizushima is the author of the award-winning and internationally published Timber Creek Canine Mysteries. She serves as president for the Rocky Mountain chapter of Mystery Writers of America, was elected the 2019 Writer of the Year by Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers, and is also a member of Northern Colorado Writers, Sisters in Crime, Pikes Peak Writers, and Women Writing the West. She lives in Colorado on a small ranch with her I made it through your name 18 times and messed up, veterinarian. There we go. Husband, where they raise two daughters and a multitude of animals. And she is here tonight to talk about her brand new release in the Timber Creek Canine Mystery Series, Striking Range. Whew, did I get it all right?
You did.
Excellent.
Very well done.
Okay, perfect. Well, I guess it's Scott's turn in that case. Hi, Scott. How are you?
Hi, McKenna. I'm fine. Thanks for having us tonight.
Thanks for being here. Okay, I'm going to make my way through your bio also. Hopefully, I don't stumble on any of it. Here we go. Scott Graham is the author of the acclaimed National Park Mystery Series featuring archaeologist Chuck Bender and Chuck's spouse, Janelle Ortega. In addition to the National Park Mystery Series, Scott's the author of 5 nonfiction books, including Extreme Kids, winner of the National Outdoor Book Award. Scott is an avid outdoorsman who enjoys backpacking, river rafting, skiing, and mountaineering. He's made a living as a newspaper reporter, magazine editor, radio disc jockey, and coal shoveling fireman on the steam-powered Durango-Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. He lives with his spouse, who is an emergency physician in Durango, Colorado. And I believe you have your 7th National Park Mystery, Canyonlands Carnage, coming out next week, right?
That is correct. Canyonlands Carnage.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm going to leave you two to chat. If anything comes up, just say McKenna and I will reappear. And for those of you watching, put your questions in the comments. Don't be shy. Y'all have fun.
Thank you, McKenna.
Thank you.
I'll jump in here, Margaret, and say that I'm so thrilled to be back at Murder by the Book. I don't know about you, but last year was my first opportunity to visit with everyone here with us tonight at Murder by the Book. And I have to thank all of you for being my good luck charm or whatever it is. I'm being very personal here to say that my series really took off last year after I was on Murder by the Book. And I just give all of you people that are listening in from Murder by the Book credit, because I thank you so much for it. It's fun to be with people at this murder mystery bookstore where we know that you're right there with us. You love mysteries as much as we do. Margaret and I think I share your enthusiasm for mysteries, and Margaret and I have had a wonderful time getting to know one another through our mysteries. Margaret writes the Timber Creek Canine Mysteries, and they feature they have many similarities to our mysteries and differences. So we'll get into that. But what I want to just kind of point out in general is that Margaret has a detective, so a little bit more of a police orientation to her mysteries as opposed to my amateur sleuth archaeologist. But we both also have this wonderful outdoors orientation, I think, that we share with our mysteries. And Margaret's mysteries are particularly near and dear to my heart because they are set in what I consider my neck of the woods, which is Western Colorado, on what I think of as the far side of the mountains from Margaret, who's over on the Eastern Plains side of Colorado. And so I just love reading her books because they take me to where I love to be, which is kind of the mountains of Colorado in this very real way. And they feature Maddie Cobb, a detective, and her remarkable canine, Robo, as well as I guess love interest and veterinarian, and also amazing, I guess sleuth at this point in his own right, Cole Walker.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's Margaret. And then my series, of course, has an archaeologist who moves from national park to national park, generally has his family along, or at some point they're going to be involved in the mystery. And that includes Chuck Bender's wife, Janelle Ortega, who throughout the course of the mystery has kind of, I feel like, come into her own as an individual and a character in her own right. And from being a single mom of a couple of young girls, when she and Chuck met, Chuck became kind of an instant stepfather. And from there has kind of adjusted gradually over the course of my series to becoming what I hope to be a more solid stepfather than the very questionable stepfather that he started out to be. And in the meantime, Janelle has come along as well. And so in Canyonlands Carnage, she has completed paramedics training, and she's working as a paramedic, which is forcing Chuck to become somewhat more of a father figure in his world to the daughters, which have been growing up through the series. And for the first time in Canyonlands Carnage, we'll of course talk through this. Janelle actually has chapters written from her own point of view. So I kind of share the stage with her. So there's been some of the development of my series in the same way Maddie's been developing in yours. And I'd love to hear. So now let's talk about Striking Range and let you fill people in on your latest. I don't know if you've got a copy of it there to hold up, but it's a beautiful cover. Again, you've got this kind of outdoor feel to it. We've got winter in your case. There it is. It's just gorgeous. And so I'd love to hear you talk about Striking Range and where Maddie and Cole and Robo are at.
Okay, before I get into that, I also want to thank McKenna and Murder by the Book for hosting us tonight. I feel like I have some roots in Texas. I spent my childhood in the Panhandle before moving to Colorado, to the San Luis Valley of Colorado. So therefore, when I chose to write a mystery set in Colorado, I decided to create this fictional town, Timber Creek, that is, like Scott said, very similar to South Fork, Colorado, Creed, Colorado, kind of over there on the western slope. So yeah, I spent my teen years there in Saguache, Colorado. I hope some of you can visit that area sometime. It's a beautiful area. And it is actually very agricultural in nature, but if you just go to any of the passes out of the San Luis Valley, you are in beautiful forested wilderness area. So anyway, hope you can all visit. All right, getting to Striking Range. Like Scott said, I have the three protagonists in the book. I have Deputy Maddie Cobb, her canine Robo, who is a character in himself, although I don't write from his point of view. He is treated like a dog. And then Cole Walker, the veterinarian. I've been married to a veterinarian for almost 40 years, 39 and a half. So I might as well say 40. But I love putting this piece in the novels where people get to watch the veterinarian work. And yes, he has turned into a sleuth. Cole has been helping Maddie solve these cases one after another now for 7 books. And Scott and I were laughing. It took us 7 books to finally have a book that was launched within a week of each other.
Right.
So it's been great being able to pair up with Scott while we go ahead and launch our books. And we're so pleased to have events together and to be here at Murder by the Book. Well, as you can tell by the cover, Striking Range takes place in a storm. So to begin with, chapter 1 opens with Maddie Cobb at a high security prison in Colorado, waiting to interview the man who tried to kill her a few novels back in Burning Ridge, which is the 4th novel of the book. She is there with cold case detective Jim Houck, and her quest at that point in the book is to try to figure out what happened the night she was abducted and her biological father was killed. And she believes, as does Detective Houck, that John Cobb, the man who is in prison, is a witness, if not the perpetrator of that murder. So they go into the prison, and lo and behold, before they can interview this man, he's found dead in his cell. All that happens in chapter 1, so it's not a spoiler. But there is a clue there in his cell, which is a book of hiking trails in Colorado. And he has dog-eared one of the pages, which happens to lead to that trail that he took her up on to try to kill her just about 6 months earlier. So Maddie and Jim decide that they must go up to that area. Maddie hasn't been back since that night that she escaped from him. And the book kind of goes from there. They get interrupted because suddenly in present time, there is a murder that turns up down at the base of the trail. And Maddie has to go back down to help investigate that. When she gets there, she recognizes that this is a girl that she met at Cole Walker's vet clinic just the day before. And that girl was pregnant, but now she is dead and she is no longer pregnant. So the new quest becomes, where is that baby and what has happened to it? And as the snow and the ice starts to cover the Colorado region, she and Robo start searching for that baby. And that's kind of the setup to the whole mystery. Bodies kind of add up and accrue. And there's a lot that happens in this book. So I hope you'll all enjoy it, and I hope you'll all give it a read sometime. And Scott, let's talk now about Canyonlands Carnage. I have been so fortunate to be able to read all of Scott's mysteries, and every year he has taken me to a different national park. Canyonlands is a very special park, and boy, let me tell you, that opening prologue chapter is just fantastic. It puts you right on the river, rafting down the canyon, and oh my goodness, I'm going to let Scott take it from there.
Wonderful. I'll bounce back and say the weather, I think, in the same way that I try to make my each park kind of be a character as I bounce from national park to national park with my mysteries, which is really one of the reasons we call it the National Park Mystery Series as opposed to the Chuck Bender or the Janelle Ortega Chuck Bender mysteries. I try to really grab that park in the instance of striking range. The weather, that storm, the menacing of that storm, and the tension that it creates is just wonderfully captured by both by Maddie, Cole, Robo, and then you as the kind of the puppeteer in it all. It's just the speed of it and the tension is just absolutely delightful. So in the same way, what I try to do with each of my books is really grab the outdoors, because we think about national parks, particularly the national parks that I love writing about. I've got 7 of them now. They're the biggest, hopefully most wildernessy out there national parks that are out there, that have just these wonderful sorts of geological or outdoors wonderments to them that I try to share with the readers. And with the new one, I went to what is everyone really considers the most remote national park in the lower 48 states, in the contiguous United States. And that's Canyonlands National Park, also one of the newest national parks in the United States. And so in a way, it's what I was able to do with it was take to another step what I've always tried to do with my mysteries, which is recognize that most folks who visit the national parks are really going to be able to have the skill set to visit. They're there to enjoy the park, but they don't have the skill set to go way back in the backcountry. And so I've always wanted it to be one of my missions with each of my books to take the reader away from the pavement back into the backcountry. Mm-hmm. And with Canyonlands Carnage, I have the opportunity to do it more than any other because of the remoteness of the national park. A few years ago, I've been fortunate. One of the loves I have is whitewater rafting, going down the rapids, as we were talking about with the start of this book. I was going down Cataract Canyon, in fact. And the way river journeys work is that you have to get dropped off somewhere where a road can get to the river, correct? And then you get on your boats, you head out, and then the walls of the canyon kind of rise up around you as you head down the river. And all of a sudden, you're cut off from society. And it occurred to me as I was heading down on this river trip, by then I had my national park series going. And so I'm honestly, every time I go to a national park now, that's kind of what I think about, is what bad things can happen, what might be a good mystery here. And what really struck me for Canyonlands Carnage, the idea that I had was that going down into that river canyon was very similar to the classic closed room murder mystery, where traditionally, of course, say Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None, you're in a mansion and you're trapped all alone because of the group of people, because of a storm or whatever, a flood. And then the bad things begin to happen. The people look around the mansion at one another and they realize, oh, it's just us. Whatever bad thing is happening is right here. And it occurred to me that despite being way out in the great outdoors, that closed room mystery idea worked perfectly in a place like Canyonlands, because once you as a rafting party go down into the walls of those canyon, it's you. There's no one else there. Everything is dependent upon you. And it's a risky place, and there are just wonderful ways to die down there, and wonderful ways for a murderer to start messing around. And so that basically was the kernel of how Canyonlands Carnage came to me in my mind. And therefore, unlike, say, last year's Mesa Verde Victim, which was more of a traditional mystery, like you're talking about with Striking Range, where we had a murder in the prologue from 150 years ago. We had a murder in chapter 1, present day. And then the storyline kind of followed, how are those those murders going to kind of connect at the end and be solved? I had in mind that river journey for Canyonlands Carnage, and the idea that my amateur sleuth was going to be along for this ride, Chuck Bender, and then bad things were going to begin to accrue. It's kind of that feeling of a journey, and then they were going to get worse as the rapids approached, and suddenly, basically, all heck's going to break out, and we've got a full-on murder mystery on our hands. And so that's where that opening sequence comes, where I've got Chuck on a raft with his brother-in-law Clarence, and Chuck has been hired on as the trip naturalist for a commercial trip that involves water policymakers who are going down Cataract Canyon in the heart of Canyonlands National Park, which is the Colorado River in high rapid form. And they're discussing the Colorado River with a group of water executives who are also along on the trip. Water executives who are trying to tie up rights to the Colorado River, that water becoming more scarce as aridification occurs and climate change occurs. And these two groups are basically tasked with going down the river, debating with one another the merits of preserving versus use of the water in the Colorado River. And in one sense, they're each night they're supposed to do this on the river. So they're tasked with kind of being at each other's throats philosophically as they debate how best to make use of the Colorado River. Well, it turns out instead they end up, at each other's throats in real life as well, and that kind of gives you that sense of mystery that takes place. So there you go. That's the kind of the headwaters of Canyonlands carnage.
Yes, it's a great.
And I would say you started talking about this very rough, tough start to your striking range. I mean, we've got a young woman murdered, her baby missing. We've got the death of the other character in the prison. Boom, boom. And then I would just love it because people need to realize how wonderfully character driven also your stories are. We bounce to what to me is one of the most wonderful scenes, wonderful chapters you've ever written, which is chapter 2 of Striking Range.
Uh-huh.
And so I don't think we'd be spoiling too much if we carry on to chapter 2 and you tell people, because I think that really gets to the theme even more than the missing baby in chapter 1.
Mm-hmm.
I think that chapter 2. So I'd love to hear where that came from, and I won't spoil it. I'll let you tell what chapter 2 is because it's wonderful.
Okay. Well, I tell you, chapter 2 was really fun to write because it did come right from my life. But in chapter 2, we bring forth even more of the theme of babies. And that's the theme that carries through the book. And the babies in chapter 2 are Robo's puppies. So he and the dog, the German Shepherd, Robo is a German Shepherd, for those of you who don't know. And the German Shepherd that we met in Hanging Falls, book 6, is named Sassy. And she is the mother of the litter. And so it opens with the owner of Sassy calling and saying, we think we're in trouble. And sure enough, they bring Sassy in. Cole does an ultrasound. You get to watch Cole do that ultrasound in that chapter and see what he sees. And he finds that there are 2 big puppies vying for the birth canal, and he wants to do a C-section to make sure that they don't lose any of the puppies. So there follows the C-section. And the reason that I enjoyed writing that chapter so much is because my 2 daughters and I have been called to troop to the clinic. Even on Christmas Day one year, we had one of my daughters had her boyfriend here to meet the parents, and we get an emergency C-section that day. We all went to the clinic. My husband delivered the puppies, and it's just all hands on deck because he hands a puppy out, and you must take the place of the mama dog because she's anesthetized, and you have to rub the puppy vigorously, get them breathing, make sure their airway is clear, and then put them in a heated box, which is their incubator. And so I tried to duplicate that experience in chapter 2 of the book. And a lot of people have written me and told me how much they love it. There have been a couple who feel that that wasn't enjoyable to them. And I find that interesting. I think that the majority of people, though, have just loved it. And I've had more people talk to me about that chapter so far than any other chapter of the book. So
well,
I'm glad you enjoyed it, Scott.
Yep. Yeah, you capture it. I can see where you've lived it. It's lived experience. It's that classic case, I think, of an author writing what they know. I mean, if people listening in here now recognize you're using these wonderful, kind of veterinarian sorts of expressions, and it's clear that you've lived this life. And in all your books, truly, that's the way it is. I mean, there are just these wonderful veterinarian passages that I find fascinating. It's really what I love about mysteries in general. I mean, that's why I just love diving from mystery to mystery, that they can be as different as possible because you get this lived experience from them. And in particular, in every one of your books, but in Striking Range for sure, I'm seeing your lived experience, and it doesn't surprise me at all that that's how you spent your Christmas one year. I mean, that just fits with exactly the life I know you've lived, and it comes through sparklingly on the page. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, well, thanks. I do always try when I first start to write a book, I sit down and I try to figure out what kind of crime I want to throw a spotlight on some kind of social issue. And so then I have to determine within that crime, what can Cole Walker do to help solve the mystery? What can Robo do to find evidence or help solve the mystery? And then what is Maddie, my canine handler, going to do? And they work alongside an actual detective who works for the Timber Creek Sheriff's Department as well. And so all of these characters go from book to book, and it seems like Timber Creek has become really the most dangerous county in Colorado.
Yeah. No question. Yeah. If anyone had any sense, they'd have bailed out of Timber Creek a long time ago.
I know. I keep wondering why Cole doesn't pick up those two precious children of his and move out of the county.
That's the fun of the mysteries, isn't it? It's just wonderful. Absolutely.
That is right. And it seems like whenever you start a book, you are looking for environmental issues. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. Yep. So in the same way that I love reading mysteries that are kind of have some sort of a value added to them, something I'm going to learn from that mystery as well as have fun, on that mysterious journey. I have absolutely enjoyed trying to build my mystery series the exact same way, because it's what I love. So I'm happy to be doing the same thing with mine. And in the case of Canyonlands Carnage, as I've already alluded, the kind of the theme where the theme of Striking Range for you is babies and this and that new life sort of thing. In my case, it's basically water, Rob. Obviously, we've got the journey down the river. We've got the rapids playing a real role in terms of the murderousness that's going to occur down in that canyon. But we've also got the water that is at issue, that is at stake. And many of us who have been, following along, watching the Western United States basically burn up this year, hearing perhaps some of the headlines that Arizona, for the first time ever, has been told that it doesn't get the share of the Colorado River water that it has traditionally been given for more than a century now. All of those things were pieces of information that I found fascinating, that I was aware of living in Durango, Colorado, and having rafted the Colorado River numerous times through the Grand Canyon and through the Cataract Canyon. And so that's what I wanted to share with my readers. And so number one, always, as you know, the first thing is you're going to give them a slam bang good murder mystery, and that's what I'm first attempting to do. But within that framework, with Canyonlands Carnage, I go back and I give readers a sense of the historical past of Cataract Canyon, of Canyonlands National Park, and how it came to be from almost suffering, having a massive dam put up, and those beautiful canyons that are now regarded as some of the most beautiful canyon scenery on the planet being inundated with water, to instead being preserved as this wonderful national park. And then I talk about the John Wesley Powell expedition and how John Wesley Powell and his group came down that river, explored the anthropological past of those corridors from the indigenous peoples who were there, as well as the amazing geologic past that's down there as well. And I get into that as well with the Grabens and all of this amazing geological stuff that's down in the canyon that I want to share with my readers. And then I bring that through to when John Wesley Powell was named the head of the U.S. Geological Survey after many, many years, decades after he had been the expeditioneer down the canyon, and was tasked by Congress to go out and have a look at the West and judge whether or not the West was going to be able to support the kind of growth that was being proposed by Congress. And John Wesley Powell came back and said, no, it's not going to. And sure enough, John Wesley Powell was right. I mean, by 1920, right, a century ago, the governor of Arizona put gunships on the Colorado River, when the state of California, across the border from Arizona with the Colorado River, creating the border between these two states, had built a big canal and was getting ready to siphon the Colorado River toward California. And so in 1920, 100 years ago, water was already being fought over, literally, with gunships by Americans versus other Americans. And 100 years later, that sort of conflict has only gotten more extreme. And that was what I wanted to share with my readers. It's, my messages, I try for my books to be informative, not say polemic or politically driven. I'm trying to share with readers these amazingly interesting environmental or social justice stories that are out there in these national parks. Most of them having a historic sort of a bent to them. And so it to me that's the fun of kind of the genre that we're doing here, is that it enables you to have that opportunity to go all these different directions. And so that's kind of what you're right. That's what I had in mind with Canyonlands Carnage, and I hope I pulled it off.
Well, what I've noticed with your books is that you just weave these issues in organically to the mystery against this background of this family, Chuck Bender's family. And so it just happens. And even though you are providing the reader with some educational facts,
right.
You're also just really highlighting what's happening in that family's life. And I've really enjoyed watching those two girls grow up in your series. And you write a book a year, and there is a year between each book, while I have had to condense my time. And even though I've put out a book a year for 7 years, only a year and a half has passed in the lives there of the people and the dog, especially, who live in Timber Creek, because we really can't rush Robo's life. We want him to stay in his prime. And I always tell my readers, Robo will not die in this series. So anyone who hesitates thinking that eventually the dog is going to be killed, not in the Timber Creek series. I just couldn't see that happen. So
no, well, Robo is such a character that I don't think anyone could see that happening. I mean, he is so competent and he is so capable, and that bond that he and Maddie have is one that I don't think any reader, me for sure, could accept if it were to be severed. except for the fact that there are dog years that move quicker than people years, but other than that, and I would like to hear, because I've learned from you, right? You and I share our manuscripts. We've had this wonderful opportunity to really get to know one another's work. And I've watched, what I've really learned from you is this character side, that how to develop character and make these people very real is something that has always been something I've worked, I believe, hard to try and make happen. But whereas you, I just feel like it's so natural.
Really well.
Well, thank you.
Really well.
I love my characters. I have a wonderful time. I've had a wonderful time with the daughters, Carmelita and Rosie, growing into their teen years now. And of course, with Canyonlands Carnage, they're full-on teenagers, and they're really becoming sleuths and forces of nature in their own right. That's been fun. But to see you do it in the course of 18 months with your two daughters, and with Cole's daughters, and the growth that Maddie is going through, and it's really beautiful. And I'm wondering, how did you do that? How have you made your people so real in these books? Because I mean, I feel like I know them personally.
Well, thank you. Before I started the series, I spent quite a bit of time with them, developing their characters, their backstories. And one of the methods that I used is the Enneagram, which is an ancient Sufi personality typing system that is used in counseling today. It's used by corporations for team building, which is how I was introduced to it. And so I decided that I would take some of my books on the Enneagram. I would assign Cole and Maddie a personality type, and then I would go through that chapter and I would make lists of the characteristics, the world view, and how that person perceives the world and I would stay true to that as I wrote these characters. So by the time I sat down and started writing scenes, I knew pretty well how to get into their heads and what they were like, and how they would react to whatever situations I put them in. So I assigned type 1 to Maddie, which is the perfectionist. And as I read more and more about type 1, I realized that, or the books that I was reading said that many times people with a type 1 personality do go into law enforcement because they have a very strong sense of what's right and wrong and justice and fairness. And they also are very protective of people. So they dedicate their lives to serve the public many, many times. So I felt that was a really great fit. And then I chose type 8 for Cole, which is the boss. And gosh, don't tell my husband this, but that's kind of where he falls. So I felt like I knew him before I even got started. But yeah, it really has helped a lot. And one of the things that the boss focuses on is security for the people that he loves. And he may not want to take a lot of time spending that time with them. He may not always say, I love you. But to him, putting a shelter, food on the table, and making sure that everybody in his family is secure and happy is how he shows his love. And so I found that fascinating because I had Maddie, who is very needy in that area. She doesn't trust anyone. And here she is in a law enforcement profession where she faces danger, I know, every day in my books. I think there might be a few weeks in between books where she's not facing danger. And then we have Cole, who wants to keep his family secure and safe. And so I thought, oh, this is going to work out great because there's a love interest between those two characters. And that's just going to be really hard for Cole to figure out, can I be married to a police officer? And so it has worked out really well. It's given me lots of great natural conflict between the two characters that they're working through. And it's my intention to get them together. So yeah, things become more solid in striking range. And for those readers who have been waiting for that, it's time to get them together.
Well, it's wonderful too that you're allowing that to develop, and there was always that temptation in these murder mysteries to throw impediments and roadblocks and real heartbreak even at some of the lead characters in some of these murder mystery series. And I love the fact that I think in both of our cases we've embraced the idea that we've got couples who are together, working together, and kind of forging their future together. And it, to me, is something that I hope continues, of course, with Maddie and Cole, because I've gotten to know them both so well. And it doesn't surprise me one bit, I have to say. What is it called? Enneagrams?
The Enneagram, yes.
Enneagram, that you were smart enough to do that at the beginning, because it really shows me why there's been this success with your series that really is culminating now. I mean, I can't even remember all the awards you've been getting here I just keep seeing them pop up, this year. They're just these tremendous awards. And then what I remember is for striking range, this is I think you could just quit and go home. If I were you, I could quit and go home, because it was somebody who said, one of your big reviews said, this is the perfect mystery, right? I mean, that's what they said. They said striking, and I agree. I mean, it's just, anyway, I'm bragging on you because you're doing such a good job, and it shows in terms of these books. People are going to enjoy what you're writing. I have to say, it's just fun stuff. So.
Well, thank you, Scott. Let's talk a little bit about your characters, because you do a great job developing your characters as well. And how is Chuck Bender like Scott Graham? How do the two of you, where did the two of you meet? Because you get into his head very well. And I have to tell you, you do a good job getting into a female point of view too. So that's not always the case, but you do a great job. So
Well,
how are you and Chuck alike?
Well, absolutely. The love of the outdoors, the fact that I can basically take Chuck and throw him into any outdoor situation and feel like I can take him and have these kind of really fun adventures with him are based on the fact that I just love the outdoors myself. I live in Durango, Colorado. I was raised in this small mountain town by parents who really threw myself and my siblings out in the outdoors a whole bunch. And then I've been fortunate to stay here in Durango and raise my own children here and do the same thing. Just have this wonderful time in the outdoors, exploring all the different sorts of aspects of the Rocky Mountains and of the canyon country and the rivers and the snow and all that are out there to be had. And so absolutely, I wanted to share that because, again, the national parks and the backyard of the national parks just lend themselves to that sort of adventurousness. So Chuck and I have that entirely in common. On the other hand, I wanted to, when I created my character in Chuck, I basically wanted to kind of throw the whole kitchen sink at him in terms of upending his life and then just kind of seeing what happened. So in Chuck's case, where I've just been fortunate to have a wonderful spouse and marriage for many, many years, like you, I had Chuck be a confirmed bachelor who had this nice, smooth life going. He would go from national park to national park or from piece of governmental property to piece of governmental property, working contracts for the government, doing various archaeological projects, perfectly content. He'd come back to his nice home in Durango and write up his reports and get ready for his next one. He'd go off hunting all alone. And I mean, he was a content guy, but he obviously was missing something because when Janelle showed up in his life, thanks to Clarence, who is a recurring character, like your two great Stella. I'm thinking when you're talking about your deputies, Stella the detective and Brody, they're just great. So I've tried to do the same thing with my supporting cast. So Clarence is Janelle Ortega's younger brother who goes to work for Chuck in book one and then introduces the two of them. And Chuck is smitten. They fall for one another. Janelle has, as I've mentioned, the two young daughters who are then instantly become a family for Chuck. He becomes a stepfather. And so then in my case, I've been fortunate to have raised two sons who are grown and gone. And I hoped that this mystery series would take off and continue. And if it did, I thought, okay, what would be fun? Well, what would be fun is raising a couple of daughters, because I didn't have the fortune to raise a couple of daughters like you did. And so in real life. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to, and I'm doing the kitchen sink thing, right? Throwing it at my main character. I didn't do the Enneagram thing, but I thought, okay, I'm just going to make life difficult for him. And so I threw these stepdaughters at him for my own case to be entirely different from Chuck being like me. And so that enables me to kind of blow it every now and then with him being a lousy stepfather. And then I can use the excuse that, well, I've never raised any daughters, so that's just part and parcel. And I appreciate you saying that I'm doing okay writing female characters, because it's, you have to be careful. And especially going in with the point of view of a female, as a male writer, you need to be careful. You need to be aware. And so I've used early readers like you and other women to read what I've written and make sure that I'm not just inadvertently either stereotyping or being basically just being dumb, which is a male trait that I'm very familiar with. And so I've used other early readers to help me on that path, put it that way. And I hope it works. I mean, I because I've had fun really developing those characters and really bringing Janelle along, as I mentioned earlier as well, so that she's really part of the team now. And so they've got this amateur sleuth team that is, in the case of Canyonlands Carnage, Janelle actually kind of comes in and takes and really comes into the scene because she recognizes that Chuck and Clarence are in danger, right. and so she's really taking things into her own, taking the reins by herself and coming in to become part of that, of the solution to the mystery as it plays out. And that gives me a chance then to introduce another part of Canyonlands, which is the most even more remote part than the river, is the Maize district of Canyonlands, which is a portion of this national park you can only reach via very difficult four-wheel drive roads, hiking up from the river. And so I get to share that with my readers as well. A place that I just love. The Maize District is remarkable, and so I try to give people a taste of it through the story.
Yes, and boy, I have not been there, but boy, you really do make that area come alive. So that is really great.
Well, I do hope people enjoy it, just as like I hope they enjoy the tension, the winter, the weather of striking range, and the way you just draw the whole thing through. It's people are gonna like it, I'll tell you.
Well, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Absolutely.
I'm back. I have to compliment the two of you. This is one of the best in conversations I have watched. Like you knew each other's books. You talked about interesting topics. Like, congrats to you. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. And I really think that you guys did a great job tonight. So
thank you.
Thank you.
We enjoy talking to each other.
We do.
Well,
We could go on for a long time.
you could tell that you also like talked about your books and you kept it on topic and you did all the right things. So it was a great conversation. I hate to come in and interrupt it, but we do have a couple questions.
Right.
The first one I'm going to do is from Stephanie. She was wondering, do your friends see themselves in any of your characters? And why don't we start with you, Margaret, since Scott just did the last talking?
Okay. I don't think so. I do try to stay away from duplicating friends, but the one person that really inspired me to develop Maddie was one of my consultants. She came from the Bellingham, Washington area. She was a retired canine handler and trainer, and she came to Colorado. I met her here. She actually trained a dog named Robo, and he was her partner in Bellingham. And I asked her if I could use that name just because I thought it was a great name for a dog officer. And she was she told me so many stories that impressed me so much. She wasn't trying to show me how brave she was, but she is a very brave person and very spunky and independent. And so all of these qualities and characteristics that I observed in her through her stories, and then I also got to shadow her while she was teaching people to do AKC tracking trials to get their dogs certified in tracking. She just inspired me so much. So I wanted to take these characteristics and give them to Maddie. So my husband might see himself occasionally in Cole. I probably have duplicated the way he works and kind of the way he manages his practice. I always tell people I took all my husband's best qualities and gave them to Cole. So that would be how I'd answer that question.
Excellent. How about you, Scott?
Well, in my case, I guess two answers. The one is that specifically with regard to Canyonlands Carnage, the new one, I really referred to the trip that I referred to earlier, going down Cataract Canyon with a group of friends. This was a private trip, but I really wanted to give readers that feel of what it's like to go down into a canyon, to hit those rapids, and then to camp each night along the river, and to really just be this cohesive group on your own down in the trip. I was fortunate to go down and have a wonderfully cohesive group. No one died on our trip. No one killed one another. But I used those experiences very specifically. And I did use some of the characteristics of the people that I saw on that trip. A lot of the plot takes place on a place called Betty Beach, which is one of the big beaches deep in Cataract Canyon. And we spent an overnight, 2 nights there. So we had an extra day there. And so I got really familiar with that place with this group of people. And so I used that setting and those folks in my head just for telling the story. But I haven't had anyone yet say, "Hey, that's me," or because especially if they're the killer, they don't want it to be them. And then the other piece of that is in one of my books, Arch's Enemy, Chuck. Of course, there's a reason that someone ends up being often a dedicated bachelor well into their 40s. And in Chuck's case, it was because he had a real real questionable upbringing by a single mother himself. And so he's been estranged, long estranged from his mother. I brought her in to Arch's enemy. She kind of forces her way back into his life now that he and Janelle are together. And she turns out to be a real questionable human being. And the readers really get a sense of seeing why Chuck became who he was and why he was an established bachelor. And so I've had to really explain to my mom that, no, Mom, it's, this is not you. I took everything that is wonderful about you and I turned it on its head. And so in that case, I'm being very clear that I'm fortunate to have had a wonderful mother and I just flipped it all for Arch's enemy.
Perfect. Probably a good clarification.
Absolutely.
So our last question for tonight is, what fictional character, past or present, would you like to meet? So just one character, past or present, fictional character. And Scott, we'll start with you this time.
Ooh, jump right on me. Fictional character. These mysteries, the most enjoyable, okay, and the hardest part of writing mysteries, which I'm just dedicating myself to. I mean, professionally, right now, this is what I live, this is what I do, this is what I breathe. The hardest parts for me, because I come from a journalistic background, I come from a nonfiction background, is putting together all the pieces of the puzzle. And I honestly find myself wishing I were Sherlock Holmes, because it's just so easy for him. And if it could be that easy for me, everything else, I love the characters. I love talking about the parks. I love the outdoors. I can just spend my whole life doing the research into, say, the water issues for Canyonlands carnage, or repatriation of a Native American indigenous people's graves, which was the subject matter for Mesa Verde victim. I literally could spend my entire life doing that. And then it comes to that blank computer screen, and it's time to put together those pieces and parts of the mystery. And I just wish I were Sherlock Holmes, because then it would be like he could just imagine exactly what what Moriarty or whoever would be up to, and he would sit there and he would explain it to Watson, like, "Come on, Watson, you numbskull, this is and boom, 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 boom," and it would just flow right out. And so, if there were a fictional character that would literally change my life, it would be if I could be Sherlock Holmes. So I can't do a British accent, so that part I can't do. But yeah, exactly. that would be it. Because that would help me so much. So very selfishly, I would love to be Sherlock Holmes.
Excellent. How about you, Margaret?
Well, the fictional character that I would like to meet just popped into my head as soon as you asked the question, and that was Kinsey Milhone, Sue Grafton's protagonist. I love those mysteries. I've read every one of them many more times than once, and I just love Kinsey. Her whole backstory just grabs your heart. And, Sue Grafton wrote those scenes with the little child sitting in the back seat of the car accident and her parents dying in the front seat. And it just, I'm getting chills just talking about it. So I think Kinsey Milhone, I'd love to sit down and have a peanut butter and pickle sandwich with her.
Yeah, I knew the peanut butter and pickle sandwich was about to come up. There was no way that wasn't getting referenced.
No, it was coming.
All right, perfect. Well, the two of you did a fantastic job tonight. Thank you so much for being on here. As always, we have a link in the comments to more information about the authors and their books, and if you'd like to order. Scott, Margaret, thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening. I'm going to sign us off for the evening. I think you've done a great job.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for hosting.
What a pleasure. It's been wonderful to be here with you, and really, really appreciate it, McKenna. Thanks to you, and thanks to everyone at Murder by the Book.
Of course. Have a great evening.